Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic True Health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 286. I am so excited for today's guest. I love her message, and I know you will too. Cynthia Pasquella-Garcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. I really love what you're doing in the world. I'm listening to the podcast, and I've been on your website, and just really fallen in love with just how you show up in the world and how you really start bigger conversations and bring so much value and transformation to your audience. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Absolutely. Well, we're all in this journey together, and my take on health is that it's more than just physical health, because and what you said before we hit record, you said that we need to create a bigger conversation for health because food alone won't fix us, and that you love to also teach the psychology and spirituality of transformation and health. And that's so on par with my experience of shifting my health. I was incredibly sick for many years, and it really did take not only transferring my diet and my nutrition, but it also took looking at my energetic health, my spiritual health, my emotional health, my mental health, and really making routines around all of that to support myself on all those levels to get my health back. And so I see that it's more than just eat right, because if our emotions are not in the right place, if our mindset's not in the right place, if our outlook on life is not in the right place, that's not health, right? That's not
That's right.
living a healthy, happy, transformed life. And I want every listener to live the absolute best life, to squeeze every drop of wonderful joy and vibrance that they can out of life. And I know that today, Cynthia, you're here to teach us some tricks to be able to have an even more vibrant life. I'd love to start by hearing your story, though, because you are a celebrity nutritionist. You're a transformation expert. You're a best-selling author. You have been on TV and all kinds of media. I'd love to go back in your story and learn more about you and how you became the woman that you are today, this woman that helps people transform.
So yeah, I'm happy to share my story about kind of how I got started and kind of how I'm got into the place that I am now and doing the work that I'm really feel like I'm called to do. And I love that you're starting with the story because I feel like we all have a story, but we often don't share it. And I think it's so important in learning to take back our power and really understand who we are and why we're here and our bigger purpose and our bigger mission. And I know for myself, Ashley, I lived in shame for so long around my story that I didn't tell it. And the importance of really owning it and speaking my truth came one day when I was speaking at a women's conference. And I had spoken that day about transformation, health, weight loss, just, really empowering yourself and taking back control of your life and health as a woman. And at the end, all the speakers were on stage, and the audience had an opportunity to interact and ask any questions of us. It was just a panel discussion. And so one woman stood up in the audience and, said, Cynthia, I have a question for you. I am in this really dark place and have been for some time. How do I get through all of the darkness to get to this place that I'm really feel called to be, that I feel like I should be living my life at, but it just seems like such a long journey. How do I get there? And it was a beautiful question and really, I thought, empowering for all the women in the audience. But when she asked that, before I had a chance to answer, a woman sitting like maybe 3 or 4 chairs down from me said, "Yeah, I'd really like to know the answer to that too, because it doesn't appear as though you've ever had to struggle with anything for your entire life. So I'm wondering what you have to say to this woman." And my first thought was, wow, she just said that out loud on a stage. I was just shocked, actually. Just, I was like, whoa. That was my first thought. My second thought was, she doesn't know. She doesn't know. In fact, no one had known my story because I didn't share it because I came from such pain and shame. So, just a little note to say that we all have a story, and no matter how shameful we feel or how embarrassed we might feel by some things that have happened, they've actually happened to benefit us. So let me just start with my story, and I think this will make a little bit more sense. So several years ago, 15 years ago now, I found myself on the cold floor of my tiny studio apartment in Los Angeles, and I had a handful of pills, and I had just made the decision to end my life. For months prior to this, I had been so sick. I know you went through your own struggle as well, and you know what that's like. I had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I was about 25 pounds overweight. I had horrible cystic acne on my face, my neck, my back. I
Mm.
suffered from memory loss and brain fog, and really had a hard time just functioning in the everyday world. And I couldn't work, so I was pretty much broke. And, I was in a city where I was completely alone. I had no family near me. I didn't really have any close friends. So I was really terrified of what was going to happen next. So, in addition to living in a constant state of pain and exhaustion and fatigue, I was also living in a constant state of fear and panic, which, clearly didn't help my physical health any. So it was a really vicious cycle. And I had tried everything. I worked with doctors and trainers and nutritionists. I did body work and energy healing. I worked with crystals. I'm telling you, I did everything. I popped the pills, I drank the shakes, and nothing helped. And so that morning that I got up, I remember I just thought maybe today will be different. And for some of us, I feel like it's just, oh, today's the day. I can do this. Some day you just have a bit more optimism. Some days you just feel a bit more motivated, a bit more encouraged. And that's what I felt that morning. So I got in the shower and I was thinking, I can do this. Let me just pull myself up. I'm used to pulling myself up. And that's when I found lumps in both of my breasts. And that was my breaking point. I hit rock bottom that day. And I remember it's like the lights were turned out. You've seen those old television sets, the big box ones that used to sit in the floor, and you turn them off and it, fades to black. And there's this one little dot in the center. I felt like that's what happened that day. And I just sank to the bottom of the tub and I put my arms around myself and I just started rocking back and forth, kind of like you'd rock a child who needed to be comforted. And I'm not sure how long I sat there, but the next thing I knew, I was shaking just because the water had gotten cold. And so that kind of pulled me back. And I remember I put a towel around me and I went in and I just sat in my apartment. And so, the hours passed by, and then that leads us up to the point where I'm sitting in the floor in this dark corner of my little apartment. And I could hear, the traffic outside, people are rushing by and laughing and going out on the town. And inside, I felt just worthless and defeated. I thought, wow, these people are living these great lives. And I've really tried, but clearly it's not meant to be. So I was sitting there. I felt, again, completely broken, hopeless, worthless, helpless. And I decided that the only way out was to take my own life. I'd suffered from depression and mental health issues for my entire life. And my health issues and the struggle that I'd gone through had created a dark hole that I just couldn't climb out that time. And so I was resigned to my fate because I was just tired, Ashley. And, the longer I sat there, I started to get a little angry too. And then I got really angry. I mean, I was angry at myself for getting myself into this situation. I just thought, oh, stupid. Like, you're so stupid. Like, how did you get here? How could you let this happen? You were supposed to make something of your life. And just, like those gremlins in our head and those voices. And we say these horrible things to ourselves. And so I was doing some of that. I was angry at the people that I went to for help that said they could help me that didn't. I was angry at God. I mean, you name it. I was so angry. And I started saying, like, why is this happening to me? Like, why me? Why does it keep happening to me? Because, it wasn't like there was just this one health struggle that happened. And I was like, oh, I can't do it. I got to check out. It's too much. My whole life had been a struggle. I lived a life that really required me to be a survivor. So, I grew up in extreme poverty. My family had no money. And when I say no money, I mean no money. We had no running water. There was no indoor plumbing. And so if we wanted to go to the bathroom, we had to walk outside and down and around the house to an outhouse. We had one old wood stove that heated our home. And sometimes in the winter, my dad would get coal to burn just to keep us warm. And, I remember going hungry many, many times. In fact, I remember so clearly one day being hungry, and I don't know where my parents were. I don't have that recollection. But what I do remember was thinking, well, let me look for some food. And I went to the cabinet and I opened the door, and inside was an onion skin and a rotting potato. So that was my life. And my home was filled with drug abuse and alcohol abuse and domestic abuse. My father tried to murder my mother multiple times, sometimes in front of us. I was sexually abused the first time when I was only 6 years old. So the point of this is that night when I'm sitting there in the dark and the cold, I just felt like I'd been fighting for my entire life. And I was just so sick of fighting. So I was saying, like, why has this always happened to me? And my heart is just broken open and the tears were just rushing down my face. And I heard this voice, and some people might say, oh, it's a message from God or a divine download or an aha moment. I don't know. What I know was that it was my wake up call. It was my turning point because I heard this voice say, this hasn't happened to you, it's happened for you. And so I thought about that for a moment. And then I realized that these things were supposed to be happening for me, that it was perfect, that as difficult as my life had been, that these experiences were supposed to happen to lead me to that one moment. And I realized that everything was unfolding just as it was supposed to. And I wasn't feeling like a victim anymore. And again, this voice I just heard, you're meant for greatness. And I thought, me? I mean, look, I grew up in a home and around a family where I was constantly told I was hopeless and worthless and that I would never amount to anything. So for me to be able to hear that I was meant for greatness was life changing. But I realized that that was true. I realized that in that moment, I realized greatness was my birthright. And it's your birthright too. It's if you're here on this planet, you were born worthy. You were born for greatness, and everything that has happened to you has happened for you, right? So I knew in that moment, I just had this deeper understanding. And, I hadn't been able to have a clear thought in months. So for everything just to click that night, I just felt like it was truly the grace of God or divine, universal connection or whatever you want to call it. So I thought, okay, well, if this is the case and this is my purpose and my mission, then I got to figure it out, right? I got to figure it out. So I kind of made a deal with God that night, and I just said, basically, if you'll open the door, I'll walk through it. And so I got on my computer that night and I thought, well, I should probably know something about nutrition and health. I knew nothing, Ashley. I didn't know the difference between a protein and a carb or why I should care. But I knew that was the foundation, right? I knew that I needed to be clear on that. So I ended up finding a certification program, a nutrition certification program. I enrolled. I put it on 3 credit cards because I was completely broke. But I also knew that I was investing in the only thing I had left to invest in, and that was me. I studied, I started researching my symptoms. I dug into every facet of nutrition. I went on to other schools and training programs. And what I really started to understand as my health started to improve and I started to work with clients was it's not just about the food and that the food alone will never heal us. I started to understand that there were reasons behind why we know what to do and still won't do it, right? And I dug into psychology and the human mind and just looking at like why we make decisions and explored trauma, especially from our childhood and how that affects our health, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health as we got older. And then also realizing that we had these deeper hungers. So examining spirituality and trying to understand what am I really hungry for here? Because I knew I had all these voids and I knew food wouldn't fill them. Neither would sex, gambling, drugs, alcohol, or anything else that I had tried. And trust me, I had tried it all. So I started understanding the spiritual connection and how relationships and our heart connection, our heart centered connection was so important to healing. And I started, relaying this information to my clients. And that's really when I started to see true transformation. My weight fell off, my skin cleared up, the lumps in my breast turned out to be fibrous, not cancerous, which was, super amazing and really wonderful. And I started to understand on a deeper level the root cause of my health issues and my heart issues. So, I'm from the South and we have an old saying there that says, when you get, you give. And so, again, remembering my deal with God, I got to work and I started helping other people and combining the science of nutrition with the psychology and spirituality nutrition. And I started creating this method and I called it transformational nutrition. And so I, worked with one with clients. I wrote books. I worked with celebrities and been on numerous TV shows, and really just in an effort to spread the word and to share what I was learning or holding up my end of the bargain, if you will. And I got asked questions about this method and this process that I was practicing, and realized that I needed to turn it into a bigger educational focus. And so I started a school called the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. And now we certify coaches or certify people to become coaches in this method of transformational nutrition. We teach them how to build their businesses, how to really help people, how to help people discover what they're hungry for. And so that's really where my heart lies now in what I do. And it's been a long journey, but certainly one that's worth it, and also one that I'm still on. I don't sit here with you, a perfect woman. I don't always have it all together. I'm still learning, and I think that's perfect for me. It's a journey that I'm happy to be on, and then share with others as I'm on it.
Oh, beautiful. I love your story, and I love that you heard that message. Um, I really feel like that we have that divine intervention that can kick in, and when we listen, it's best to listen to the whisper, so we because it gets louder and louder and louder. That message just keeps getting louder and louder until it finally hits us over the head with the cosmic 2x4. That's why we want to listen to those whispers. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really believe that we're all here to inspire and to help each other, uplift each other. We can all learn from each other and uplift each other. Um, I definitely want to get into teaching the listeners today how they can discover what they're really hungry for. And you said why we know what we do but still won't do it. Can we talk a little bit about that? So, why is it that like everyone knows to eat more vegetables, everyone knows they should, or everyone knows they should go to bed at 9 or 10, or they everyone knows they shouldn't eat sugar or whatever, right? Or even like we'll just do this thing where we'll like binge Netflix till 2 in the morning and then feel
Right.
horrible the next day, but we'll keep doing it. Like,
Yeah.
why is it that we know and we know what we should do, we know what we shouldn't do, but we
Hmm.
don't? Like, what is going on there? Is there like a rebellious teenager inside of all of us that hasn't hasn't got enough party time in? Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that absolutely might be the case. And yeah, it makes sense, right? If you just if it was about listen, if it was about having just the perfect diet or having a checklist of things to do every day or a great morning routine, then we'd all be great, right? We'd be healthy. We would just be vital. We'd be living the life of our dreams because God knows there's been enough books and programs and websites out there dedicated to sharing this information. And a lot of times you can get it for free. So it's clear that we don't just need more information. We need to understand why we know what to do and still won't do it. So what that means is really taking a closer look at your actions, really starting to understand why you do the things that you do. Because we don't do that, Ashley. We get on a diet, we fall off the wagon, and we think, oh, God, I knew I couldn't do it. Like, "Ugh, I'm always going to be fat. Like, I can't ever get it together. I'm just such a loser. I couldn't stay on this diet for more than 3 days. Like, oh, it's so pathetic, right? That's what we do, which is so crazy because we have enough challenges every day, let alone talking to ourselves in that way, but that's what we do. And then we work up our courage again one day and we try another diet. We end up having the same conversation. It's just a vicious cycle. That's not what true transformation is. Krishnamurti said, when you begin to understand what you are without trying to change it, then what you are undergoes a transformation. You see, what he's saying isn't to completely just transform everything that you are. That's the wrong thing to do. That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing, which are why shows like, some of these weight loss shows and quote unquote transformation shows that are on TV today are just so misleading and so unfortunate. And in my opinion, do so much more harm than good because what we're trying to say, or what they say, is that you're not good enough as you are. You need to be a better version of you, right? You need to be something that you aren't. And that's just not true. What you need to be is who you've always been before everyone stepped in and meddled and told you how you should be, right? When we're born, we are perfect and we believe that we're perfect. And if we want something, we ask for it. If we don't get it, sometimes we cry, right? We don't have any qualms at all about just owning our greatness. We'll dance. It doesn't even matter if anyone's looking. Like I have a little 10-year-old stepson and he will just turn it on. It doesn't matter if we're, in the middle of the grocery store or what. He'll just start dancing if the mood strikes him, right? And we don't do that as adults. We should, but we don't. You see, we've gotten so far away from who we started out as on this planet because when we were little, we heard things like, oh, Ashley, you're being so this, you're being too that, you're being too loud, you're being too rambunctious. Just sit still, Ashley. Like, look at little Betty in the corner. Little Betty's not running around crazy. She's being a good girl, right? And I speak from the female perspective because that's what I know best. Men certainly have their own challenges and they're given a lot of shoulds while they're growing up as well. But what we start to do is we say, there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
My parents, my family, my loved ones, I'm inherently flawed. They don't approve of what I'm doing. There's something wrong. So if I want people to like me and I want to make them happy and I want to please people, should probably do what they say I should do, right? And so then that should just transfers from our parents to our friends to society and we listen to that, right? Why? Well, because no one wants to be different because if you're different, they'll tease you, right? I had a client one time who was about 120 pounds overweight. And she always had a great sense of humor, always laughing, poking fun of herself. And so one day we dug into that, and I said, "Why do you do that? Why do you use humor at your own expense?" And she said, "Well, if I'm not funny, then they'll call me fat." And I was like, "Oh," and it broke my heart, but I understood. She was trying to just be what they said she should be. And in doing so, when we all do that, we completely lose touch with who we are. So, what Krishnamurti is saying, just to bring it back to that, what he's saying was you have to understand what you are and why you're that way. Because when you understand, then you'll automatically transform into who you've always been meant to be, right? Into who you truly are, into the person that you were born. as, because only then can you really step into your power. Does that make sense, Ashley?
Mhm. Absolutely. That's it's so sad that we beat ourselves up so much. I had early on in the show, it was like within the first 20 episodes, I had a mental health counselor on the show, licensed mental health counselor, who said if we looked at the how we talk to ourselves like how we talk to other people, we'd call the cops on ourselves. We're so abusive. And that
Yeah.
really had me start to listen uh, um, more to my own inner dialogue,
Hmm.
because we've got, we think it's okay to treat ourselves this poorly, but we would never in a million
Yeah.
years treat, our child or our mother or our husband or whatever, our best friend, the way we treat ourselves. I also like what you said about childhood, because I'm a mom of a 3-year-old, and I this being a parent has you look at your childhood a lot, and like
Yes, it
I
does.
brush my son. My son has long, gorgeous, blonde, curly hair, like he'd fit in Southern
Hmm.
California. Um, Not so much here, although Seattle's like kind of, I guess, all over the place. But people always think he's a girl because he has this gorgeous hair, but I
Aw.
can't cut it. It's so him. He loves it too. And but when I brush his hair, every time I brush his hair, I remember when I was a kid, my mom would pull on my hair and it would hurt and I'd cry and she would say, "Just suffer. Just suffer. Like
Mm.
suffer through it." And just, and she just keep brushing my hair really rough and I would cry and it would hurt so much. And so when I brush my son's hair, like every week, I remember these memories. And I know my mom loved me, but
Sure.
she'd say things like, just suffer.
Right, right,
And it
right.
stuck with me,
Yeah.
and so it's just like really interesting how we treat, like, or I remember my mom once told me I laugh too loud. I was like, I
Mhm,
had this
mhm,
belly laugh,
mhm.
like something happened and I was just like, it was funny. And my mom said, "Stop laughing. You
Mhm.
laugh. Do you know that you offend people with your laugh because it's so loud?" Like, and it was just one of those moments, and I was maybe
Wow.
like a 12-year-old or something like that. And it was one of those moments where I felt completely stifled and ashamed and embarrassed of my own laugh.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
really interesting because, and on some level she thought she was being helpful.
Right. That's right. I think that's important, because I've heard you talk about your mom and your mom's illness, and I understand that she probably wasn't coming from a place of how can I make Ashley feel really bad about herself today? How
Right.
can I just break my daughter's heart? Like I don't think most parents do that. Now,
No.
I had a tough situation with my mom, and it was very different. She was very different from your mom. My mom was, had a lot of mental health issues, was nice, narcissistic, bipolar, just very mean to me, just mean to be mean. And there were lots of situations that I could share. But the thing that I think it's important to remember is that whether your parents are the best parents ever and meant to do these things, or whether they just were maybe trying to do the best they could with what they had, that the thing is, a lot of times they're trying to protect you. Now, that might sound crazy when you're like, well, why don't they be nice? But what they're trying to do, like when your mom says, Ashley, you laugh too loud. Okay, what she's trying to say is that, Ashley, some people, like, they don't live their life as fully as you. They don't celebrate the joy from the depths of their belly and just live full out like you do. To them, like that's a very scary thing. And so what she's trying to do is protect you, right? She doesn't want people to react to you negatively because then they might say something mean to you or they might talk bad about you, right? Oh, that Ashley and her laugh. Ugh. And so she was really maybe trying to protect you, but we don't understand that as children. What we do understand is that our parents are always right, right? So, psychologically speaking, if your parents say something, you will try every way in the world to find evidence that it's true. Even if there isn't any, you'll take it at face value because you will not make your parents wrong. Because if they're wrong, that means you're not safe. right? And so if you're not safe, anything could happen. And who wants to walk around like that? So mother must know best, father must know best, right? And so we put that faith and that belief in them. And so we'll take on what they say and we'll believe it as the truth, when in fact, it's not. But when you live with that for year and in and year out, I mean, decades throughout your life, it takes some work to undo that, right? It's like we have to go back and reclaim ourselves. Like I like to ask people, what are you really hungry for? Right. And what we're all really hungry for in the end is validation and acceptance for who we are, right? We're just really hungry to be seen and heard and feel like we matter. The real us, not the us that we are pretending to be. And the reason that some of us are so far away from that and we struggle with our health and our relationships is that we are trying to be a version of ourselves that we think other people want. And so we're pretending. We're walking through our lives pretending. And some of us do this our entire lives, and we never fully understand that. And so we never really fully step into who we are. We are compromising who we are and what we want and the things that truly make us happy and feed us for our entire lives. Because if the people around us really found out who I really was, then they may not like me, right? Wives will hide who they are from their husbands for decades, and vice versa, right? We'll do this on and on. And so, what you have, and I believe this is why so many marriages fail, because we can only pretend for so long, and then that gets really old, right? They fell in love with a version of ourselves that we created for them. And that's not who we are. And you can only keep up the charade for so long, right? And then it starts to crumble. So I think it's a bigger conversation, and it's not a simple answer. It's not just, avoid gluten and eat 5 servings of greens and you'll be great. It's where we have to really start doing the work. And that's what really, we're talking about, right? Is having these bigger conversations, going deeper so that when we discover that the us that we've become, right? We can start to understand why we've become that way and what events in our lives led us to decide that this is who we should be, right? So that then what we can do, Ashley, is really start coming back to our true self. Right? We can start to understand what we are, as Krishnamurti said, so that we can begin to undergo that transformation. Because what we do is we become the observer, right? So once you practice this long enough, you can start to say, oh, okay, this is me doing that thing again. And now I understand why. Or, you're on a diet, you fall off the wagon. Instead of just beating yourself up and having those horrible conversations with yourself and saying those nasty things, you can start to just be gentle and just seek to understand. It doesn't even matter about the behavior, just seek to understand. You're on a weight loss program, but that pizza looks good. You might think, I wonder why I'm craving the pizza. Like, I know that I'm really focused on my effort to lose weight and get healthy. I wonder why I'm craving the pizza. Like, do you understand? You just start to process the thoughts. I wonder. Well, it's because I feel like I've been deprived. Well, when else have I felt deprived in my life, right? You start kind of going back in time, if you want, time traveling, right? And you start to remember these times. Well, I felt really deprived, when I felt like my sister got all of the attention and my mom didn't really care about me so much. When you start to get to these root causes of why we do these things that we shouldn't do. We know better, but we still do them anyway. Does that make sense? How you sort of just start tracing back, you become the observer, you start to wonder why instead of beating yourself up, and you start to truly try to understand who you are and why you're making these decisions instead of just again having the terrible conversation and falling off the wagon and then deciding to do the same thing 2 or 3 weeks later.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're being gentle with yourself and loving with yourself. And also by
Right.
by becoming the observer and asking questions like, well, what triggered that? And what am I really craving? Why am I craving this pizza? What is it fulfilling?
Hmm.
What is it? And so
Hmm.
start like become really good at asking questions.
Yes.
That creates a break state from that old program of, you know, I crave, I cheat, I beat myself up, I feel bad, and then I do it all over again, and then I start a new diet and then I
Mhm.
do it all over again. So whatever that cycle is that we were in, that all of a sudden created that break state. And now instead of, maybe she eats the pizza, maybe she doesn't, but at least she spent some time asking herself, and maybe she has to eat the pizza to find out what is this fulfilling while I'm eating it? What is this giving me? What am I, what is this fulfilling? What would I feel I was missing? That it
Yes.
was giving me, instead of going, I suck and I'm stupid, and yada yada. She asking herself, like, well, what's really going on? Like, what is
Yes.
this, creating? I had a guest on the show that focuses on helping people have a healthy relationship with food. Like, her the whole thing was that people, like, she doesn't help people lose weight. She's like, I don't care if you lose weight. I want you to, like, be like, have an actual healthy, emotionally and mentally healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
And I told her, like, I get these cravings for like specific, like, dim sum, piece, like, hagao, silamai, silampao.
Mhm.
And I get really, like, I'll have this, like, craving for it, and I just have to go for it. I have to go have some dim sum. And it's not that I'm, like, doing this giant binge eating, but, I eat till I'm full because it's, like,
Mhm.
delicious.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, why did I do that? This isn't my diet or whatever, right? And
Right.
she goes, well, she said, when in your past did, was dim sum, so something along the lines of, like, when in your past did this really matter to you? And I,
Yeah.
recording the interview, burst into tears, because
Mm.
both my parents have passed away, and my I have some really great memories, and my dad took me to dim sum. And
Mm.
when I was 3 years old, my dad took me to sushi, like a real sushi restaurant. It was
Yeah.
1983. Sushi wasn't, very popular back then. And he took me to a real sushi restaurant, and they taught me, domo arigato gozaimasu and doi toshimashite. And they were teaching me Japanese. And I had this was my first, like,
Wow.
bonding experience with my dad. And many of my
Mm.
memories of bonding with him were over food, but specifically, like, cultural foods that weren't this, normal everyday thing. He'd take me to all kinds of interesting, restaurants where it was very authentic, and I'd learn the language while I was there, and I'd learn more
Mm.
about him, and I'd feel this strong connection. And so those foods for me, when I would crave them, when I was, like, really deep down inside, I was, like, missing that love and that connection with my dad. And when I
Yeah.
understood that, it was like the power of the craving did, like, it no longer had this power over me. I no longer beat myself up about it. I let myself have those foods once in a while, and while I have them, I'm like, instead of beating myself up the whole time, like, why am I eating this food? I know it's not healthy, yada yada. I talk about my dad the whole time. And I
Mm.
like fill myself with love. And I don't even have to eat those foods to do this now. I mean, I can just talk about my dad and with my husband, and just, like, have this, like, moment of really remembering him, and how, all the good times, you know what I mean? Because, I mean,
Mm. Yeah.
life was, for me, wasn't perfect either. I mean, both my parents were loved me to bits, but they were intense to live with. They were A-type personalities, very intense people. And having lost them in my early 20s was, like, I mean, my in my 20s was difficult, because they never really got to see me as an adult. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So when I look at this, it's like, wow, like, this food, I could have gone the rest of my life beating myself up and feeling guilty and shaming and guilting myself over wanting this food, when really, but right below the surface, what I really wanted was to have that, connection of love, and remembering my dad, and filling my body up with love and connection.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you had that experience, and it seems like this is an ongoing thing that you do, that you really work hard on understanding what you are, right? The why. I think that's so critical, and I love that you've really turned that corner. And I also love that you said, like, it doesn't matter if you eat the food or not. It's not about the food. It will never be about the food, even though it is. It isn't, And so I think that's really important. It's not that you get to a place where you're like, oh, I'm not going to eat the dim sum, or I'm not going to eat the pizza. That's not what this is about, right? You are really doing it in a way that allows you to be fed by something so much bigger than the food that you're
Mm.
eating, right? And that's, I think, like, that's what you're really hungry for in that moment. And so I love the way you really traced that back. And if we can just do that, if we can just sit with that, and if we can just feel, and I know it doesn't feel good to feel, it's painful, right? That's why we try to numb it, and that's why we try to not experience that. Like nobody wants to just sit and relive old pains. Like that is not my idea of a good time on a Saturday night. However, if you're looking to finally make a difference in your life and stop beating yourself up and get past the food and just this obsession that we all have with it, and maybe it's not food for you, maybe it's gambling or sex or drugs or alcohol or whatever the case might be, it's so worth it. It's so worth it. And what you've done, Ashley, is you've transformed. I mean, I think people throw that word around loosely, but you don't have transformation if you don't experience some biological change, some spiritual change, and some psychological change. You have to develop a deeper understanding and a deeper truth that you can truly embody before you've really, truly healed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the
Yeah,
word breakthrough because that the breakthrough is like the aha moment, but then you
yeah,
have to do something with that breakthrough,
that's right.
right?
That's
Because
right.
you can
Right.
have breakthroughs and then just go back to your old way of being.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the transformation is take that aha moment, take that breakthrough. Okay, now now what am I going to do with this? So I love that you say the first thing is start asking questions, have that break state. So when you catch yourself in that behavior of that self talk, first of all, we got to become self aware. So start listening
Yes.
to your
Thank
self
you.
talk. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it takes journaling. Sometimes just being silent. Some people don't even have 5 minutes of silence to themselves a day because
Yeah.
they always have music on. They're always, I mean, I love that you guys listen to the podcast. Like keep listening to this, but sometimes we're just always listening to something else or always taking in media. And whether it's like working with our coworkers or our kids or our spouse or friends or whatever, there's or having music on, there's very little time that we're just not doing anything and listening. And sometimes that's what we have to do to so that we can actually start to hear our own voice, right? Or hear our own self-talk.
Hmm.
And so we're listening to our self-talk, and then after we listen to our self-talk, then we have to become so aware that we catch ourselves in the middle of beating ourselves up. Sometimes we've been beating ourselves up for 5 minutes before we go, oh my gosh, I'm beating myself up. Okay, this is great.
Yeah.
Okay, step
Yep.
two. So catch ourselves beating myself up. Step one. Step two, you said, is start asking questions. So become the observer, like this third person, fly on the wall, watching ourselves beat ourselves up. And then we go like, what's up? So can you give me some examples of great questions that we could ask ourselves to help slow things down and begin
Yeah.
to listen and begin to just break this all up and so we can start to gain some learnings?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing to do is to not necessarily think about questions that you can ask yourself in terms of why am I doing this? What is it about the pizza that's really pulling me in? It's not really so much about that. It's really about getting out of your head and into your heart. Right. We tend to be very logical. We'll try to think our way through anything. But that's just not the way we work, right? We make all of our decisions based on emotion, and then we use logic to back it up. Okay, that's just the way it is. And you can't deny that. It's like, I need the new pair of shoes. You don't need them, you want them, right? That's pure emotion. You see them, it resonates, and you're like, I gotta have those shoes. But then your logic is, well, the others are kind of scuffed. I have that business meeting coming up. I really need to get these. I haven't treated myself in so long. I got that bonus. You see what I'm saying? Like we use logic to back up our emotional decisions. That's the way we work as humans, and that's okay. As long as you understand that, that's okay. So, in order though to go deeper into this conversation that we're talking about having here and becoming that observer, you got to get out of your head and you got to get into your heart. You got to stop thinking and you have to start feeling. Okay. Now, this is where most people say, okay, done with this podcast, but because feeling isn't fun. What we're asking you to do, what I'm asking you to do is to really start to feel like, what did it feel like when your dad took you for dim sum? How was that? What came up? How did you feel when you knew that that wasn't going to happen anymore when your dad left? Like what was that like, And so no one wants to really feel that pain, right? It's why we just turn to the diets and have somebody else tell us what to do because that's easy. But it's the emotions. You see, pain that's a messenger, right? All of the most important messages we will ever receive, I truly believe this. I've worked with thousands of clients and I've seen it to be true, are all hidden within the pain, right? And we have to feel it. You have to be willing to sit with it, and it doesn't feel good, and you're just going to have to go with it. But here's the good news, and there really is good news. An emotion only lasts 90 seconds. That's it, 90 seconds. Now, you might say, Cynthia, I have cried for days. I have wallowed on the floor. I have kicked. I have screamed. This pain has lasted me for years. And I understand that that's how it feels. I understand that that's how it seems. However, when you're in the moment and you have this pain, this emotion only lasts for 90 seconds. The thing that makes it last longer are the stories that you keep replaying in your head about the experience, right? You see, here's the thing, a belief is made up of three things, all right? I call it the 3E equation. It's the event that happened, the emotions that you felt, and the explanation that you gave it. So, what happens is when you're feeling these emotions, you go back to your explanation because, again, as humans, going back to that logic, right? We got to explain everything. We're not okay with the unknown. We have to just understand. We have to have an explanation. It drives us crazy if we don't, right? Which is why some of the woo woo stuff, people are like, I don't know about that, right? And so you have to be able to sit with the emotions. When I told my story, I shared my story and I said, I had this just breakdown. I was so broken, Ashley, and I was in so much pain. And for the first time in such a long time, I was just sitting with my feelings because I couldn't do anything else. And it was only through just absolutely surrendering to the pain that I had been feeling for so long, that I'd bottled up for so long, that I was able to hear that message, right? So you have to connect with the emotion that you felt. You're going back, you're understanding the stories. What was the emotion that you felt? Because when you can identify that, then you can understand the explanation that you gave it, right? Because the explanation is the story that's playing over and over in your head. Because we have beliefs, and I said beliefs are made of 3 E's: the event that happened, the emotions you felt, and the explanation that you gave it. So let me give you an example so that it makes sense. So you're a young girl or you're a young boy and you come home and your report card, it's not looking so good. Well, your parents sit you down and they say, look, little Tommy, this is not okay. You got to make something of yourself. It's a cold world out there. You got to have skills. You got to make good grade. You got to get it together if you're going to live a good life. I insist. You're grounded for 2 weeks. The next report card, it better be better or else. Right? Like they're really instilling that fear of God in you, or just having a conversation. What we hear, what little Tommy will hear, isn't, oh gosh, man, my parents, they just really want the best for me. How great of them to just push me to be my best. Look, Tommy doesn't hear that. Little Tommy hears, you're not good enough. So little Tommy believes that and he feels the emotions. And those emotions, that's what really solidifies and traps that trauma in our bodies, right? Traps that past pain in our bodies. So little Tommy is like, oh, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. That's his explanation, you see. So the event happened. The parents set him down. He felt these emotions, just really hurt, lots of pain because of the explanation he gave it, which was, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Right. And so, what happens in this process when you sit with the pain and you start to go deeper and you feel those emotions, you can go back to that event and you can create a different explanation. So now, if little Tommy goes back, he feels that pain from that time his parents set him down, and he feels it. It's so deep, and he knows, he remembers that event so clearly. He remembers the words that were said, the looks on their faces, just that pit in the bottom of his stomach. But if little Tommy can say, oh, my parents just wanted the best for me. They had had a really hard life growing up. They didn't have a lot of money. It was really hard on them to support me and my sister. They just really wanted to try to make it to make me understand how important it was that I always do my best in the world. And man, how great is it that I had parents like that? Well, that changes the entire thing, right? So now the emotions that he feels are probably, ones of joy and happiness and gratefulness at a minimum, right? And the event had no meaning except what we gave it in the first place. It's just a random event. So now little Tommy can look at all of these times that he's been triggered by these feelings of I'm not good enough, and he can be like, that's just not true because I am. Right? Do you see how that works?
Absolutely. You change the context
That's right.
of the memory, and you could even give it a positive spin, like, wow,
Yeah.
look how loved I am. Look how strong I am. Look
Yeah,
how
that's
well prepared I
right.
am for the world.
Yeah, people are looking out
Yeah.
for me. They're there to help steer me straight when I get, out of line. Like the world has my back. Like imagine if you would have thought that for the past 30 years instead of I'm not good enough.
Right.
Right? But
Right.
it's never too late to change. It's just a belief, and you can change a belief starting right now in this moment, right? Because if you change the explanation, then your emotions shift, and the event was only just an event to begin with. So there's no belief, right? Because the equation
Hmm.
doesn't balance out anymore. That's how you start to change your beliefs. That's the way then you change your actions so that when the pizza is in front of you, you eat it or you don't. It doesn't really matter. It's not about that, but you're empowered again in your own life. Again, you're understanding what you are, why you've made these decisions, why you know what to do and still won't do that, so that you can make a different decision the next time, right? That comes from a place of being empowered as opposed to being disempowered and just grasping at straws for solutions.
That's so beautiful. You've given us so many amazing things already. So teaching us to listen, to the self-talk, catch ourselves when we have when we're beating ourselves up, like observing, becoming the observer, asking ourselves some questions, and then we figure out, I think it might have to have something to do with this event in my past, like this painful event in
Hmm.
my past. Instead of the more we push, so the thing with pain is the more we resist it, the more the pain stays,
That's
because we're
right.
telling ourselves, like you said, we're reliving the story over and over and over again. The story we tell ourselves, which for Tommy was my parents didn't think I was good enough, and I'm not good enough, and I'm not worthy, and I suck, and whatever he was repeating. That was the story he was saying over and over again. The explanation we give ourselves is the story. And then instead, he goes back to that same memory, feels the pain for less than 90 seconds
That's right.
while he's saying, what else could it have meant? Because the thing
Yeah.
is, as a 6-year old, we'll put a meaning on it that the six, like, this is the funny thing, is that we are running around with these limiting beliefs, these limiting decisions
Hmm.
about ourselves that we made when we were like 5 years old or
Right.
7 years old or 12 years old. Like we have a 12-year-old's decision running a 40-year-old's life, right? Or a 5-year-old's decision running a 30-year-old's life. Like something happened, maybe like in the first grade for me, these two girls didn't want to be my friend. And it was just like, oh, I don't know. I think I decided something like I'm lonely and no one wants to be my friend or whatever, right? Like, I'm letting a 7-year-old's or a 6-year-old's decision run my life. You know what I mean? And run my feelings about my relationships and my friendships. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
catching ourselves going back to that painful memory, and it doesn't matter whether that was like the first memory, or it just pick one of those memories to start with,
Sure.
and then start to ask ourselves questions like, what else could this have meant? And what do you think, now coming from the adult perspective,
Yeah.
what do you think what was their motivation? I also like playing with these memories, and maybe if we, because sometimes it can be something harsh like a rape, like
Hmm.
murder, right? Like,
Yeah.
so some
Yeah.
pretty hard hard things to or getting beaten up,
Yeah.
some really hard things, or car accident, but something that just seems like senseless, that there's no possible positive thing, that person that did it wasn't like coming from a positive place, right? Because most of these childhood memories are like, you could say, okay, well, my teacher or my friend or my brother or sister or my aunt or uncle or my dad or mom actually loved me and have the best intentions for me, and I could see where they're coming from. But sometimes there's events in our past that were like, screw that person, they suck,
Yeah.
and they were nothing but bad. Um, so I mean, for those, I like to ask questions like, how um can I create some other explanations for it, like
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
not even, they're not real, but like, the my example is, come up with a silly explanation, come up with a funny explanation, come up with a bizarre explanation. And so you just kind of make up a bunch of ones so that it starts to like you realize that your one explanation
Mhm.
that you came up with when you were 6 or 7 or whatever, that this one story you're holding on to it is not the end all be all, that you've let run your life, that there's other explanations and they're all equally, like pointless. Like, why would we let any of these explanations determine our future, determine our success, or determine how we feel about ourselves now? But can you
Mhm.
speak to
Mhm.
those people who like want to resolve the beliefs that they created around events that they really can't, they're having a hard time coming up with a better explanation to let go of the story that they're holding on to.
Yeah, I think that's a really great. I love that you're bringing this up because I think it's so important. And, I think that we have to remember if we want to be understood, that we have to first seek to understand, right? So if you want to be understood, first seek to understand. Most of the time, when these things happen to us as children, it has nothing to do with you, right? So as Maya Angelou would say, you're not even in it. You're not even in it. You're just not, right? It's not about you. Even today, I mean, I there's so many things every day that we're faced with, people saying stuff about us or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not about you. It's never been about you. Won't ever be about you. It's always about them. So, what I like to do is try to understand. So, my birthday was just a couple of days ago, and it was really hard for me. And every year on my birthday, it's really hard because when I was 8 years old, I got up on my birthday and I was really excited, Ashley, because I was a kid. And what I knew was that I get a birthday cake, and I told you we don't have much money. We didn't have any money, to be honest. And so we didn't really get gifts. But my grandmother, who had passed away the year before, would always make sure that we had a cake. Right? Did a birthday cake. She'd make it from scratch and, she'd milk the cows and we had this great birthday cake. And so I got up and I was really excited because I didn't get that a lot. And I remember waiting all day, just waiting. And then, the morning turned into the afternoon, turned into the evening, and I was getting a little discouraged. And I remember I said to my mom, like, hey, it's my birthday. And I remember her reaction was just, yeah, so? And I was like, well, well, do we celebrate? Like, is there a cake? Do I? And I remember, and it's still hard to talk about. I remember she looked at me and just said, with this nasty look, and just said, "You think you're special." And I heard in that moment that I wasn't, and that I was stupid for even thinking such a thing. And it broke my heart. And and then years later, she would call on my birthday, but it'd be the wrong day. And so I thought, if my mother doesn't remember my birthday, if your own mother, the person who birthed life into you, doesn't remember that day that you appeared, it's probably a safe bet that you're not that spectacular. You're not very special. No one really cares so much that you're here, Cynthia, right? Like that's what I thought. And so I've done so much work around that. I've gone back to the core of the pain. And what I understand is that I wasn't even in it. It had nothing to do with me. It had to do with her own fears, her own inadequacies, what she had been through as a little girl. Her mother was an alcoholic and entertained many men. They were homeless. My mother, slept in a car. She had no idea. You can't give someone what you've never had, right? And so what I do is I don't try to go back and say, oh, what was it about me? What can I learn from this? It's really to understand that it wasn't about me at all, and I can forgive the person. I can understand, I can move forward, and I do that for me, right? Not for her, but for me. I don't ever have to forgive the action. Sometimes people take actions against you that are just completely unforgivable, and that's okay. But unless you let go of that, you see, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It doesn't make sense, right? The only person that's going to feel that poison every day is you. The only person that's going to die a little bit every time they feel that is you. So even though it's tough, because you feel like, oh well, they don't deserve my forgiveness. It's not about them. It's about you taking back that piece of you that you let someone else take away so long ago, right? And I said, like, it's not easy. Still to this day, there's triggers every year on my birthday, and people are saying, I used to do this thing, Ashley. I just made it a point to stop doing it this year. People would say, Happy birthday. And I'd say, Happy birthday. Because I felt like I couldn't receive that. I had to give them something back. Do you know what I mean? And so I had this really funny little habit. Somebody would say happy birthday. I'd be like, happy birthday. Because, like I don't deserve to receive that. I'm not special. Let me give it back to you too. And then it means I'm not special today. So even now, it still triggers. But the difference is I can be the observer and I can say, oh, that's me doing that thing again. I can go back and I can just sit with that little girl who was so broken and who felt so silly and who felt so worthless. And I can love her and I can say, it wasn't about you. And I'm so sorry this happened to you, but it's not happening now. And I'm here and I've got you and you are good and you are special. And look at you. You're meant for greatness, right? So I can do that. So what I want to say through sharing that is, it's not as if you do this work one time, then you're just, wipe your hands and you're just done with it. You're cured forever. It doesn't work like that. However, it does pass faster. I used to sit with this and it used to bother me for days around my birthday. But now I'm just like, oh, I have compassion and I have love for that little girl who experienced that. I'm like, oh, it's all right. It's all right. That's not happening anymore. I'm really sorry, but you're good now. And so just I'm sharing that just so it helps people to understand that this is an ongoing process, right? But it does get easier. And as a matter of fact, it gets empowering, because you get to take that back.
Absolutely. Yes, you get to take that back. I love it. And you could also go back and focus on all of the birthdays while your grandmother was alive.
Yeah, that's right.
And because it was like one birthday kind of ruined the rest of them, but you could, I don't know how old you were at that point, but you could go back and all the birthdays that you could possibly remember with your grandmother and her celebrating with you,
Yeah,
and just focusing on that. Is it
right.
why is it that like will negate all the really good, like
Yes,
like
yes,
you have like,
yes,
let's say 10 amazing birthdays and then one
yes.
bad birthday. It's like we'll let
Yep.
that one bad thing ruin all of it. But
Yeah.
why is that we
Oh, I'm so glad
can
you're asking.
remember the one negative thing but can't remember like the 10 years of positive things?
I know. I'm so glad you're asking this because I wondered the same thing for so long. I was like, why? Right? So, another story. I remember when I was publishing my first book, I went on the Dr. Phil show, and I did this whole thing. It was really amazing, and I really felt like I'd given people great information, whether they bought the book or not, whatever. I went on the show and I thought, oh, I've shared some great information. I cooked, I did recipes, like I showed them everything. And I felt so good, Ashley. I thought, yes, paying it forward. I'm getting the message out. I'm going to help people. And so, sure enough, Facebook started up, as soon as the show aired. And I was so excited. I was so excited to go on. And I started reading all these comments and I was so grateful. And people were saying such nice things and talking about how it had helped them and just really good stuff. And then I read this comment that said, well, maybe she should use her own diet because she has mom arms.
Oh my
And I was
god.
like,
First of all, offensive to
"What?"
moms. First of all, second of all, you're gorgeous. I wish I had your arms. I'm a mom. Why don't I have your arms? Okay?
Well, I don't even know what that is. Like, had no idea. I was like, What are mom arms?" I had no idea. I was just devastated. I
Is
was
like
so upset.
one arm really stronger than the other because you held a baby? Like, what is that? I don't
No
know.
idea. I mean, I've seen some moms with some really great arms from carrying these little babies around. So I had no idea. But I just knew from the way she said it that it wasn't a good thing? And so there were so many comments. I mean, so many that were so nice. I don't remember any of them, but I remember this one verbatim to this day. I remember the woman's name. I won't share it, but I remember it. I remember her picture, like I remember, right? But the thing is, so your question, why do we do that? Like, what are we just glutton for punishment? Like, what is it? So here's the thing. As humans, we have this thing called a negativity bias. So what that is when we hear something negative, right? Then we latch on to it and we see that as the truth. And then we do something called looping, which is we spend the rest of our lives searching for evidence that that belief is true, right? So it's just the way we're built. It's just the way we work. And it's designed to protect us, right? It's designed to show us our flaws so that we don't get, eaten by a tiger. Like it's very antiquated. It's very outdated. We don't need this anymore. It's kind of like your fight or flight response now, right? Most of us stay in that all the time because of the amount of stress that we have, but it was developed to help us run fast to avoid the tiger so we weren't eaten, right? The negativity bias is very much created in the same way. It's meant to protect us. It's meant for us to be able to see where we're quote unquote weak or maybe not so strong so that we can compensate for that, or so that we know our limits and we don't, challenge a tiger to a fight or whatever the case might be, right? So it's very primitive and it's very critter based as to why we do this. And the problem is we start doing it when we're just little kids. So then we've built this up over a lifetime. So it takes a lot of work to go back and undo that. Now, you can, by having pattern interrupts, right? Which are where you do things like say, oh, there's me doing that thing again, I wonder why, and you go down that branch or down that road, right? Because what you're doing is you are creating new neurological pathways. Now, you probably know this already, I'm sure you do, but we have these pathways in our brain, right? The neurological pathways, and they're designed so that we don't even really have to think. They're just accepted ways of doing things. So you get in your car, you put your seatbelt on, and you start it, you put it in gear, you back out. You don't even think about doing those things. You just do it. They're just ingrained in you. It's a habit, right? Well, this is the same thing. You just automatically respond and react because you have these default negative beliefs. So this is why it's not. This is why changing your habits are so hard. Is because we have those neurological pathways, and they're kind of like ruts. Back in the day, the wagons, all set sail or set off for the west, the wild wild west. And what they would do is they would create these ruts in the earth, and then every other wagon just followed right in them, and it made the path really easy, right? Neurological pathways are the same exact thing. So it's difficult to get outside of those ruts, which is why it's so difficult to change your habits, but you can do it, right? And creating different thoughts, understanding your emotions, and giving new stories, new explanations to the event that's happened. That's how you do that. So it's not always easy, but it is always worth it. And there's nothing wrong with you as to why you keep doing this. It's just the way we were built, right? So just you can relax, and sigh a deep breath and just let that go and stop beating yourself up for always, choosing the negative explanation because that you can't help it. That's just how you're made. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love it. I
Yeah.
yes, I had a similar experience with reviews of the podcast. I have over what is it? Is it over 500? It's over, see, the thing is, I can't, it's funny. I can remember that I have like 21 one stars, but I can't remember how many five stars I have. It's like, it's either like, I think it's 506 or 520 5 stars, but it's like I could remember. I look
Wow.
at that number, I go, 21 people literally hate, because it goes like I hate it, right? When you put one star,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
21
yeah.
people out there in the world like hate me and want to see me dead and want to see like my podcast like deleted from the earth. And and I and I'll remember that, but it's like there's like 500 raving or 600 raving fans out there or whatever that like would hold me up like and carry me in a parade, you know what I mean, and celebrate the podcast with me. And it's just funny because I'm like, there was this one negative, the review that I think it was 4 star, like it wasn't even 1 star, it was like a 4 star review. and it ate away at me. I was just like, "I can't believe this. Like, why couldn't she just write me an email and give me," because
Right.
she thinks she's helping me by giving me quote unquote feedback, but it's like this, it's just like mean. It's just mean girl to
Yeah.
like to give a a public negative review of someone's life's work. Like I
Yeah.
pour my
Yeah.
heart into
Yes.
this, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
like that woman who said you had mom arms, whatever that means. And then I was totally like sitting there like stewing in it, right? Except I'm really like I've been spending years studying NLP and training myself to like not create stories and live from stories. And so I went, okay, like what other possible like I'll take, okay, fine. Let me find the positive learnings. So I click on her name and or her profile name in iTunes, and it shows me the rest of the reviews that she's given, and they're like, and it was
Uh,
other 4-star reviews, and I'm like,
uh,
"Oh, it's totally her. Okay,
you're not even in it,
this is
Ashley. You're
not
not even in
I'm not
it.
even in it." It's like, and I had one of those like, "Oh, okay." She was
Yeah.
like, all of her reviews started with like, I love this butt. I'm like, this is great.
Right.
She goes around ripping on people she likes because she thinks she's like helping them in some way. I'm not even in it. And so I just, it's interesting because like I've had a few negative reviews that are like, I talk too much or I whatever. I have one person say I talk over people, which was really funny because I actually got listeners tell me, thank you so much. I love how you interview because you never talk over people. And I'm like, I just thought that was really funny that I have like these two totally different realities, like, so
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not me. Like, I've really got to get that I'm not here to please everyone, right? But I what comes up for me are like the times that my mother said something to me, or times that like on the playground at school, like the rejection of childhood comes up
Mhm.
when we get these
Yeah.
little tiny things. Like Facebook would be a great example, or Instagram, or whatever, or Twitter. Someone says something negative and we're triggering inside of us the belief that we came up with when we were 6, and your mom said something, or some mean girl said something, and yet this person who triggered us, it's not about us at all. It's totally about them. But because we have this pain still inside of us that we haven't resolved, we keep living it over and over and over again.
That's right. We do. And again, it's not your fault. It's the way you're born. It's the way you're made. It's the one of the reasons we've evolved, right? We are just hardwired to pay more attention to negative information than we are positive information. And again, it goes back to the most basic need, which is just survival, right? It's just staying alive. That's also why we numb emotions, by the way, and don't want to feel them because we think, oh, I just couldn't handle that, right? And in fact, when there has been extreme trauma in a person's life, they can block it out. It can just be completely
Mhm.
shut down. The brain won't remember. So, a very sad story, but one that makes sense here, just to kind of help bring this point home, is my sister, when my little niece was 2 years old, was in a car accident, and my little niece didn't make it. She didn't survive, and my sister did, but had traumatic brain injuries and lots of physical injuries, metal plates, and broken arm and leg, and all of these
How old
things.
was your sister?
She at the time would have been 19,
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
very young.
So she should have memory of it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So, she was in a coma for a while. She came out, she was in, she was out, and when she finally came out for good, I she didn't remember even having a baby. And at the time, I was just like, "What the holy baby? Like, what? What do you mean?" And
Oh.
so I talked to the doctor, and he said, it's very unlikely that she'll ever remember." And I thought, I don't even know how that's possible. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. How do you just not remember having a child? And he said, look, the brain, your body's number one focus is to survive. It's the number one goal, right? Stay alive. Otherwise, what's the point? It's the body's number one goal. And the brain knows that. So if the brain knows something that it fears the body can't handle, it'll just block it out. And you just won't remember it. Like, that's how
Yeah.
powerful this stuff is. And this is why when we started off, it's like, you got to understand the psychology, right? You got to understand what's going on in the mind and in the spirit if you really truly want to heal, because it is so very powerful. It's so very powerful. So, and one other thing I'll say just about, the negativity bias. I always like to say, don't believe the comments, right? Here's the thing. I also don't feel like you should go through life with your head in the sand. I think that's kind of silly. I think as humans, sometimes we like to take things from one extreme to the other. So, I've heard people say, "Well, Cynthia said don't read the comments, so I'm just not going to read them." Well, there is information that can be gathered throughout your life, right? I think you gather the ideas and the thoughts, the opinions of other people. I think that's fine. And question if there is some validity in it. There may be, there may not be, right? Either way, it's not about you, but sometimes there is validity. But look at it, take it in, see what serves you, but then always look within yourself for that truth, right? You got to have that truth. We all want so badly to just be accepted by everyone, to feel like we're good enough, to feel like we fit in, like we're not complete weirdos, like me, by the way. We all want that. But if you don't ever live your own truth, you're always going to be imprisoned by other people's opinions. And you're
Mm.
always going to be hungry for that one thing that you don't have, even though to everyone else you're doing the right thing because you're doing what they suggested. But the thing that you don't have is that inner knowing, that inner truth of who you really are and what you're really hungry for.
Love it. Because my next question was getting on to how to discover what we're really hungry for. So I think you just answered that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, be willing to ask the deeper questions. Be willing to challenge yourself. Be willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable because that's where the magic is. Be willing to feel the pain. Be willing to feel in general. Be willing to stop numbing. By the way, most of us spend our lives numbing because a lot of us out there are survivors. But what we don't realize, and I didn't realize this until I'd done it for, well, my entire life, was that you can't selectively numb your emotions. When you numb pain, you're numbing joy. When you're numbing that past trauma and the fear that you felt from that, you're numbing happiness and bliss. You can't selectively numb. So essentially, you're taking away all of your power and giving it to the past. And that's not okay. That's why we're hungry. That's why we eat the food and drink the drinks and we do all of these unhealthy things. We're looking for that thing that feeds us, right? But we got to be willing to go deeper and unearth what those deeper hungers are because we're left with these voids, and we'll never be able to fill those voids with anything other than what's missing in the first place.
Beautiful. Brilliantly said. We look at the opioid epidemic. We look at, I mean,
Yeah.
1 in 3 people are overweight or obese. So there's, and
Mm-hmm.
and and the thing is, like, our food is just like drugs. There's so
100%.
much processed food and sugar, and we're all, yeah. A really good book is The Pleasure Trap by Dr.
Yeah.
Lyle and Dr. Goldhammer, because it talks about, like, listen, we've got this ancient, mechanism inside our head for survival, which is the dopamine that we're always chasing, the salt, oil, and sugar, the hyper palatable foods. And we're also getting that little cocaine, light up in our head when we eat sugar,
That's
right? That
right.
we get the processed food, we get that little light up. And so we're self-medicating with food to feel better. And the meme is out there. Like, you have a breakup, you either go to the booze or you go to the ice cream, and you're sick. The caption is like a picture of a woman watching TV eating a pint of ice cream because they just went through a breakup, right? Like, it's, or the girlfriends come over with like cookies and bottles of wine. Like, this is totally acceptable socially to self-medicate, to soothe emotions, to numb emotions instead of process them and triumph, and come out better, like come out like the phoenix,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so we don't have a media that portrays healthy emotional and mental health.
Yeah.
We
You're
don't
right. We don't.
we don't, because the norm is eat junk food and die of cancer or heart disease. And look at, basically, if you want to be a statistic, keep doing what everyone else is doing. if you don't want to live your life like a statistic, then you're going to have to completely be a salmon, go upstream and do things really radical, like feel the pain and feel the emotions and stop self-medicating and pause before you eat the donut and ask yourself questions and start feeling the emotions and dive in that way to grow that way. We're gonna have to be salmon because this is a very unpopular place to to be empowered, and to live an empowered life is dangerous and vulnerable, because the norm is to numb ourselves and be this kind of drunken idiot society of buying into drugs. Like, I mean, I cannot believe how many people are on medications because
Oh
they
my
go to their
gosh.
doctor and they mention, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I can't sleep, I have anxiety, whatever it is. And the doctor doesn't
Hmm.
go like, oh, like, let me talk about your life. Like, doctors have less than 15 minutes with you. So they don't like go in and examine your life and find out, well, why are you upset or depressed, or why are you having some anxiety? They're like, I've got some great drugs for you. Here, go home and take some drugs. And I keep
Hmm.
hearing back from listeners that when they get put on these drugs, like you said, their joy is robbed. Some of these drugs even stop you from having an orgasm. I knew a
Yeah.
woman who was like, she was taking these drugs because she was really depressed, but then not having an orgasm made her depressed. So she's like, well, what's the point of taking these drugs? Like, I'm not depressed on these drugs, but now I can't have an orgasm, so I'm really depressed, because
Exactly.
so it's like, what are we gonna do? And so many people are either self-medicating or getting on actual medications. Um and the real, like what are we doing masking things when the real root cause is just go within and listen and have a conversation with ourselves?
Yeah, seriously, I think that's such a great question. And what are we doing? It's like trying to patch a dam with a band-aid. It doesn't ever work, right? And so many things that you said are so true. The first problem is food is so acceptable, right? It's an acceptable way to numb. It's glorified, like you said. I mean, at work, you get a lunch break. You have to eat. You don't get a drug break at work so that you can go, do a line of cocaine and then come back feeling better about yourself. But you do get a lunch break. It's encouraged. You should take that. It's food is a really can be a really tough one to get around. And the other thing that I've seen is just this um, glorification of wine and drinking, especially for moms, for entrepreneurs. I mean, there are morning talk shows where the hosts are drinking,
Oh my
and I'm just like,
gosh.
what is going on? Like, what is going on? But the more people that do it, the more socially acceptable it is. And then it's kind of cool when every day you're having a glass of wine. And then are you having a glass of wine every morning after you drop the kids? It turns into like this very scary thing. It's a slippery slope, And so, but again, it's socially acceptable. And we have to be willing to get back in the driver's seats of our own life. The reason that we're here is following the status quo. The reason that we're here is because everyone said you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And we listened, right? The reason we're here is that we gave up our own power. So you can continue to do that and float downstream with the food and the wine, right beside you on that raft. Or you can say, I'm tired of this. I'm going to get out of the water. I'm going to let the food and the wine keep going, but I'm out. And it's time to do something different. It's time to really start understanding. It's time to reconnect to who I really am. It's time to share my truth instead of acting like it didn't happen. It's time to start understanding that these things happen for me, not to me, and understand that the opportunities that they brought me, right? There are no extra humans, and you are here for a reason. If not, you wouldn't be here, right? If there wasn't something that you're meant for, which I believe is greatness, I know it is for every single one of us. If that wasn't true, you wouldn't be here in this earth school going through this. So don't throw away this opportunity and wake up one day when, it's close to too late and then think, oh, I wish I'd have started years ago. I wish I would have questioned the status quo. I wish I wouldn't have had to go along to get along. I wish I had stood in my truth and reclaimed my power, right? You got to do that now because this is it. There's no dress rehearsal. We aren't just trying to get our stuff together so that one day we can live that life we're meant to live. This is it right now. So you can keep floating down the river, just let the stream keep on carrying you right beside everybody else who's doing this and being lost in the process, or you can get out of the water. It's really up to you.
I love when you said Earth School, I was like, ooh. That's great. That is so great. Cynthia, I love what you teach and I feel so uplifted, inspired. I hope my listeners do as well. Your voice is soothing, your message is so clear. Something like spiritual and personal growth are very foggy to me at times. It's just there's so much
Mm,
information and all of it seems kind of like theory and I need like rubber hit the road, and you're like
yep.
nonstop rubber hits the road. Here's the actionable steps to take because like I said, you can have a breakthrough, but then you could just go back to your old ways of being if you don't apply it. And the way in which you share is all about application in the moment. So I love it. Um, when listeners have felt the calling to really get on board with Earth School, and start like getting in touch with their true self, how can they connect with you? Can they work with you one on one? Do they apply for your school that you created? Should they jump on your website and YouTube and start digesting your free content? Like, tell us what people should do next to connect with you.
Sure. Well, everything can be found on my website, which is just Cynthia Garcia, really easy.com. And there you'll find, I have a free guide for helping you discover what it is that you're really hungry for. It's 6 steps. It's very similar to what we talked about here today, but just allows you to really go a little bit deeper. So, if you're signing up and you want to enroll in your Earth School, that's a really great first step. In addition, I do have a show on YouTube called What You're Really Hungry for. And I interview, some of the world's top experts and athletes and thought leaders to really give you tools to get to the root of what it is that you're hungry for, to really feed those deepest desires. And again, you can access that just from my website. And then if you're looking to help others, whether you're a coach or you want to become a coach or you've had your own transformation or you're just really wanting to just put yourself into it and go through that transformation, then you can go to transformationalnutrition.com. And that's our school, the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. And you can get lots more information there. We have a ton of resources that are designed to help you really explore these deeper hungers, really understand how, the biological, the psychological, and the spiritual elements of transformation all work together, just so that we can, give you tools on your journey. We have great blog posts that help explain this concept even further. And you can go as deep as you want to go. So we have a lot of resources out there for you, no matter where you are on your path or where you are on your journey. So yeah, connect with the websites, transformationalnutrition.com or cynthiagarcia.com.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been such a pleasure. Um, I, I love your message. I love what you do. And I love that you're able to touch the lives of our listeners today. You are welcome back on the
Mhm.
show anytime you want to come teach more. You are welcome back to come anytime you have something to launch or promote or show or give. Please come back.
Thank you, Ashley. That's so kind, and truly, thank you for giving me a platform and letting me be with your audience. Again, like I said when we started the show, like I really love what you're doing, and this isn't just one of those things where it's like, oh, now they're saying nice things about each other. I really mean it. Like I followed your work. I didn't know what you were up to, and then I've listened to the podcast. I love your no nonsense way of approaching topics. I love that you're brave enough to really step out and share your own struggles and your own stories in hopes that it might inspire other. And I love that you're so selfless and giving. So it's truly an honor to connect with someone like you. And I'm just super grateful that, you have me here. So thank you, truly, just for being you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so appreciative that we were able to connect And I'm imagining, the tens of thousands of people that you touched today
Mm,
for being here. It's really
mm.
exciting. Awesome. Well, then I can't wait to have you back on the show. So this isn't goodbye. This is just thank you, and hopefully we'll connect again soon.
Let's just see you later.
All
That's
right.
all.
See you later. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashley.
Hello, True Health Seeker. I have a very exciting announcement. I have spent over a year, I've spent about 14 months collecting all of my information that I use with my clients for ending anxiety. And I created an online program. I'm very excited about it. We just launched it. And for you, for free, I have a webinar where I teach you 2 powerful mind tricks for removing anxiety, ending worry, and controlling fear so it stops controlling you and your life. In my free webinar, you will learn what causes anxiety and how to stop it, the science behind the mind-body connection, overcoming fear of public speaking, getting unstuck, ending that fear of things not working out, ending procrastination and overwhelm, and feeling excited, grounded, and calm instead of fear and worry. I have so much to teach you in my free webinar, and I'm really excited for you to come check it out. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar. That's freeyouranxiety.com/webinar, or look in the show notes of today's podcast and you'll see the link there so you can jump into the webinar and learn all these wonderful, powerful tools that will end your anxiety and create excitement and happiness instead. Go to freeyouranxiety.com/webinar and sign up now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next live webinar.